As soon as you heard Miss Riley Savage read the gospel lesson this morning, several of you knew where I would be headed with this sermon. We've heard this gospel story 1,000 times before, right? We think we have a good grasp as to what is going on. Jesus takes a child and uses her as an object lesson to teach the crowd. Be like this child, sweet, innocent, loving, trusting, and you'll enter God's kingdom. You have to become like a child. Well, that's the way it goes in Matthew, but this is Mark. And the story here is slightly different. Yes, in Matthew, Jesus presents a child and says, whoever becomes like this child is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. But here in Mark, Jesus does not say, become like this child. Jesus says, when you receive a child like this little one, you receive me. In other words, when you care for her, when you love her, you're caring for me, you're loving me. As one commentator puts it, according to Mark, the point does not lie in the child's attitude, but our attitude toward this child. Let's take a step back. It's important to note that childhood in the ancient world was pretty far removed from the sweet and happy time like we think of it today. Children had no legal rights. A father, should he want to, he could brutally punish, sell, or even kill his own child for disobedience. By the time Jesus spoke these words in Mark, 30% of children were dead by the age of 6. 60% of children were dead by the age of 16. It was a harsh time, for children were the least valued members of society. In fact, I was reading last week some writings from a medieval Mediterranean theologian, and he said this: in the midst of a raging fire, a man is obligated to save first his father, then his mother, then his wife, then last of all his child. I tell you all that to say this: when Jesus places a child in their midst, we need to know what's actually going on. I don't see it as Jesus showing them a sweet and lovable newborn and says, receive this cute little baby. No, he tells them to pay attention and welcome into their own hearts and into their own lives that which they considered to be of no value, no consequence, disposable, invisible. Jesus puts in their midst someone they don't even know they're missing. And in missing her, they are missing God. They don't see her because they only see themselves. Spending time with a child when no one is looking for no reward is spending time with God. You want to be great, Jesus says? Receive this child. Now, I don't think Jesus is simply talking about children being the unlikely agents of God. No, I believe Jesus is talking about all the little ones of this world. All those who are rejected and broken, those who have been ignored, abused, assaulted, those who are poor, the disabled, the outcast, the hurting. When we pay attention to them, when we welcome them, when we see them, when we care about them, when we love them, Jesus is clear, when we do all this, we do this for him. Henry Nouwen you've heard me tell you stories about him before. He was a Catholic priest and author who was a professor at Harvard, Yale, and Notre Dame. He was an incredible academic, famous writer, numerous books, wonderful speaker. One day he gave all that up. He left the glitz and glamour of academia to work at the L'Arche community in Toronto, where he helped care for the poor and people with severe mental and physical disabilities. From time to time, Henry would still be called to speak or give a lecture at a distant city. And Henry found out from the other staff that when he was gone, the residents there, those with the disabilities, they would cry and cry, thinking Henry would never return. So, on each of his trips, he started taking one of the residents with him. On one trip to a lecture at a university, Henry took a special needs adult named Bill Van Buren. They entered the big lecture hall together where Henry was introduced with great applause. Henry then introduced Bill, and Bill stood proudly and waved to the crowd. There was some modest applause for Bill, and then to Henry's surprise, Bill walked up the steps onto the stage and stood right next to him at the podium. Henry wasn't sure what to expect, but no matter, he began his lecture using a manuscript as Bill stood right next to him. As Henry finished each page, Bill would reach over, take the page, and proudly place it on top of the preceding page. At the end of the lecture, everyone cheered. Henry's lecture was a great success. But then, to his surprise, Bill leaned over and whispered in Henry's ear, "I'd like to say something." Henry thought, oh gosh, he's going to embarrass himself. But the truth was, Henry said later, he was thinking, gosh, he's going to embarrass me. Finally, he said, "Sure, Bill." Bill moved to the podium. He looked out over the large and vast audience, and with his shoulders thrown back, he said, "Hello, my name is Bill. The last time Henry left, he took Steve with him, but this time he asked me. I'm very happy to be here with you. Thank you very much. Drive safe, everyone. Good night." And the audience broke into thunderous, extended applause. And Bill stood there smiling before the adoring crowd. If you asked anyone in that big lecture hall what Henry Nouwen said that night, they might remember a couple things, might not even remember that. I doubt they'd remember the breadth of the entire lecture. But you can bet they remembered what he did. They can remember the man who lovingly stood beside him. They can remember how Henry received and loved one of the little ones, just like Jesus did. And I'd be willing to bet they would remember Bill Van Buren. They would remember him proudly turning the pages of Henry's notes. They would remember his simple words and the look upon his face. They would remember the love that he had for his friend Henry. When you receive Bill, you receive me. When you receive the homeless woman on the corner begging for change, you receive me. When you receive the abused wife, you receive me. When you receive this child, you receive me. What Jesus does here, I believe, is give us one more lesson on the upside-down politics of God. That is, if you like to be king of the castle, the top of the heap, the head of the line, go right ahead. That's fine. But that's not where you'll find Jesus. Jesus is down here at knee level. So many folks today say, "Where is God? I want to see God at work. I want to see God's face." Well, my friends, there is a way to see God. You can find God today before you leave this church, and Jesus tells you how. Find a child here in this sanctuary. Go to reception and find a little child. Give to her a holy high five and say hello to God. Amen.